Hello, thank you for joining us today. We are here to talk about child protection at Rabat American School. My name is Miss Katie Buell. I am the elementary school psychologist and counselor.
And I'm Rachel Gerbic. I'm the secondary school counselor, and I'm new here this year, so nice to meet you all.
So today we're just going to be going through child protection at the school and talking about our curriculum. As you know, October is Child Safety Month. So our curriculum at elementary and secondary is going to be have some focus on child protection and safety. So the outcomes for today, we'd like parents to be able to understand the definitions of abuse and neglect, be informed about our training here, be introduced to our curriculum, and learn about our reporting procedures and protocols. So before we begin, I want to just introduce who our team is at school. So if there is ever any allegations, who a family member, a teacher, or a student can come to either one of these teams depending on what grade they are in school. Our elementary team is comprised of Miss Katie Koenig, she's our principal, and myself. And we also have, based in the elementary school, is Miss Latifa, she's our school nurse.
And in the secondary, we have our secondary school principal, Mr. Ted Fuller, and myself, Rachel Gerbic. Sorry, that's Dr. Fuller.
Okay, so what do we mean when we talk about abuse? We are looking at 4 kinds of abuse: physical, sexual, emotional abuse, or neglect. So I'm going to kind of go through each one of the terms so we all have consistent language and terminology and we know exactly specifically what we're all talking about. Physical abuse is the intentional use of physical force that typically will result in harming the child's health, development, survival, or dignity. The most common injury that we see, of course, is bruising. The tricky thing is that, especially at the elementary age, kids get bruises all the time. They fall off slides, they bump into things. So it's just kind of understanding a pattern of typical bruising on a child versus something that's maybe in a very strange place or in a hidden area that wouldn't usually be exposed to those kinds of bumps and bruises. So those are the kinds of things that we would look out for or maybe notice. For sexual abuse, this is typically a type of abuse that the child is not developmentally able to understand what's going on. They're not able to give consent, and they're not prepared physically, developmentally. And also it's a type of abuse that violates kind of social norms in society. And this is typically seen by adults or other children who are in a position of kind of power over the victim. For example, a coach or a tutor after school or a teacher or a family member who's older and there's a perceived notion or sense of domination or power over a younger child. For emotional and psychological abuse, these are both isolated as well as a pattern of incidents. That's kind of the failure of a caregiver or a parent to provide support and to provide adequate standards for a child's healthy development. So this typically could damage the child's physical and mental health or their social development. So these could be things like patterns of belittling, shaming a child, threatening them, maybe teasing them or embarrassing them in front of peers or on their own, that embarrasses them, that makes them feel bad about themselves, and does damage either their academic, their social, their mental growth. And then lastly is neglect. So this can be an isolated incident or over time, a pattern of incidents where the caregiver is not providing the resources to support the child. So it could be not providing in the areas of health, education, they're not sending their kid to school, or they're keeping the child out of school for a long period of time, hindering their emotional development, their nutrition, or shelter and safe living conditions. And this is not to say that children that are neglected have parents without the financial means. You can have all of the money in the world and not be caring for your child or making sure their clothes fit them or their clothing is appropriate for the weather or that they have healthy snacks when they come to school. So this is not a financially related thing, but just kind of a matter of caring for and supporting a child's needs. So what are some of the proactive procedures at Rabat American School that's required of all returning teachers, brand new teachers, and non-teaching staff? So we have janitors, we have our cleaning staff, we have typically when we had ASAs or team activities, the coaches of the ASA instructors would come in on campus. And so everyone gets this training. So we have a staff training on the indicators of abuse, like we just spoke about. And then we review the code of conduct with staff, which they all sign immediately. We talk about tips on dealing with disclosures. So if a family member comes to us or a teacher or a child comes to us and discloses information, we talk about how it's dealt with, who are the people you need to talk to, and how to best get support and help. Every year, the school subscribes to a program from Educare, and it's an online course and certification on child protection. And it goes through all of the areas, the indicators, disclosures, how to keep everyone safe, both families, staff, and children. There's a mandatory reporting timeline so that once someone is informed of a disclosure, there's a set timeline that it follows so that things are dealt with immediately. And then also all employees at the school are required to have a police background check before coming onto campus. And that includes things like the people like the referee or anyone that's on campus working with any one of our students. So we talked about during the staff training, everyone reads and signs our staff code of conduct. Again, it's a requirement for all staff and teaching and non-teaching staff. So when signing this, we agree that we're going to treat everyone with respect and dignity. We're going to comply with all the mandated reporting requirements, cooperate fully in any investigations of abuse, maintain appropriate physical boundaries, and use positive enforcement. So, if there's an ASA or a sport that the coaches are positively reinforcing kids and they're not leaving the kids out or singling them out or not allowing them to play or anything that's kind of perceived as this negative consequence or a punishment. And the same thing with classrooms. We don't send kids into timeout or send kids out of the classroom. We use a more restorative approach rather than punitive. So we're going to start to talk about the ASA curriculum that we use for the month of October. ASA is the Association of International Schools in Africa. And this curriculum is a developmentally appropriate exploration of key concepts to help support children. So it's developmentally and age appropriate. In elementary, it has kindergarten, but pre-K, we start some of the conversations up to 5th grade. So it kind of talks about 5 big ideas. So we talk about building the right vocabulary. When we use terms in the classroom, we're using anatomically correct terms. We want to leave no area for misinterpretation. We want to make sure that if a kid has an allegation, we know exactly what they're talking about. Or if a kid comes in mentioning something that might have happened at home or in ASA, they're not using kind of nicknames that they have at home or things that might make it unclear to understand what they're talking about. So children will be exposed to factual, anatomically correct discussion of body parts. The young ones in elementary school review the concepts of safe. Who are safe people to talk to in my life? What areas are safe to be? What's safe to do alone? What's safe to do with an adult or a friend? So that whole concept of keeping ourselves safe and identifying people who are safe in our lives. And then assertiveness and responsibility. So when we feel unsafe, when we have a bad feeling, it's our responsibility to take care of ourselves and to take care of our family and to speak up and to be assertive. We practice saying no, using an assertive tone and assertive body language to help support the kids that if there ever is a situation, they're able to feel comfortable and confident in disclosing and reporting it to us. And then Rachel will talk a little bit more in a bit about the secondary concepts. They have 4 core concepts, which are identify, access, act, and value. So I'll just briefly go through the curriculum. This is the scope and sequence at elementary. So as you can see, again, pre-K and kindergarten are kind of lumped in together, both doing things like just identifying safe and unsafe touch in people, making rules about, it's okay for people to touch me here, but not here. talk about steps for safety, and then what if someone breaks the rule. So it's very kind of rule oriented and just general being safe. As we go through the grades, as you see, it gets a little more, it gets a little different depending on the developmental level of the kids. So a lot of it will be just talking about identifying safe and unsafe, making rules, figuring out who it's appropriate to tell. And then around second grade, we start to talk about assertiveness and saying no and using a strong voice. And up to grade 5, if you'll see, they talk a little bit about in lesson 4 relationships and assertiveness. This is not about sexual relationships. This is about relationships with coaches, relationships with friends, relationships with teachers, boundaries, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in those kind of relationships. And then leading up to our responsibility. If someone tells us to keep a promise that's not safe, it's our responsibility to tell someone because it's not keeping anyone safe. So that's kind of the overview of our curriculum at elementary.
Thank you, Katie. And for secondary, we also do grade level appropriate, age appropriate content, and it is discussion based. And it does cover the 4 concepts that Katie mentioned to identify safe and unsafe situations. So students will really be outlining, they'll be able to produce and talk about what are those different situations where I might feel unsafe, and we have discussions on those. And then who are those trusted people that we can access and tell? Who are the people we can go to when we have a situation that we don't feel safe in? Act to feel safe. What are the ways that students can say no? How can they be proactive and really learn to recognize unsafe situations and be proactive for themselves and for their friends, and not get into those situations to begin with, hopefully, but also what to do if they do find themselves in a situation where they feel unsafe. And then finally, value is really about talking about self-worth, right? The value of ourselves and how we, by feeling strong as a person, by building our self-esteem, we can feel confident and not get into some of those situations where we might feel unsafe. So it's really about identifying one's own values, your limits, your what you can expect from situations and from other people, and really outlining that for yourself and for your community, what your expectations are for your community. So we have those discussions. I teach the grade 6 advisory, so we've already started on some of those discussions, and the students are quite interested and happy to share about situations where they feel safe and unsafe, and also where they can get help at school. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So what happens at RAS when suspected or disclosed abuse or neglect is reported? We have a board policy for that, the responsibility of the school staff. All members of the school staff who have reason to believe that a student or students may be at risk of abuse or neglect, or who have actual evidence of such abuse or neglect, shall report suspected or confirmed cases of abuse or neglect to the school principal or school counselor, that's me, without delay, normally within 24 hours. Recognizing that it cannot compel them to do so, the board encourages persons other than school staff, for example, parents, yourselves, who have reason to believe that an RAS student may be at risk for abuse or neglect, or have actual knowledge of such abuse or neglect, to discuss their concerns without delay with the principal or myself, or with Katie. The board policy on confidentiality reads, the administration and staff shall respect the privacy of any student and family involved in all cases of abuse or neglect. So any reports will be, the content of that and the identity of that person will remain confidential and will not be shared. We do have a system for follow-up on disclosure or suspected abuse. And these are the steps. They're a little bit hard to see here, but our aim first and foremost is to ensure the safety of each child. So making sure that child is not in the vicinity of the person who is abusing them. If further investigation is deemed appropriate, the director will select a response team, and then that response team determines whether there is a concern, and the director joins the response team for careful consideration of possible interventions. So each case is looked at individually, and the response team responds accordingly. For our child protection policy here, we adhere to the policies on reporting and confidentiality. We regularly review and update our child protection procedures as necessary. We look at these each year. We deliver curriculum on child protection to students at all grade levels, which we've outlined today. We train all employees and screen potential applicants, just as Katie outlined. All new staff go through a child protection curriculum at the start of their employment here. And so all teachers coming on board have that training. And we keep parents informed on any updates through the hotline. And you can help support our child protection program here at RAS by giving advanced written notice to the school if your child is being taken care of by another caregiver in your absence. If you're traveling or you're away for any time period, we need to know who your child is with and that person is safe. You can help us by keeping medical records and contact information up to date so that we can reach you if there ever is a concern. You can help us by familiarizing yourself with the school procedures and manuals, attending these kind of sessions, getting to know your child's counselor and principal. Definitely, we can be your first point of contact. Please consider carefully before arranging any travel that will take your child out of school for any extended periods or away from you for any extended period. And get to know the other parents of your child's classmates, so that you know who your child is spending time with. And definitely report any concerns that you have about your own child or any other child.
So thank you guys so much for your time. Again, just to review, this is about not just protecting our students, it's about protecting families, it's about protecting parents and siblings, it's about protecting the staff, it's about keeping everyone safe. Like that's the main goal for our schools, to keep people safe. And with the curriculum, again, it's not an explicit sexual education curriculum. It's about teaching kids, identifying safe things, understanding feelings that they're having, being able to stand up for themselves, be empowered and assertive, and owning kind of the responsibility of getting help when they need it. So we really just want to make sure that the kids have all the tools that they need to feel comfortable, as well as parents and staff, if there is a problem, to report it and to get the best help that they can. If you guys have any questions, typically we'd be doing this in person. We'd have a question session. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any or all of us. We have Sean Gowdy, who is the director of the school, his email address, myself for elementary student concerns, and Ms. Gerbic for the secondary school concerns. So again, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and feel free to reach out with any questions and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.